Capital punishment, according to Lewis Vaughn, author of Doing Ethics, is punishment by execution of someone officially judged to have committed a serious or capital crime. Merriam-Webster defines capital punishment as death as a punishment given by a court of law for very serious crimes. DeathPenaltyInfo.org reports that as of 2018, the death penalty is legal in 31 U.S. states, in addition to the United States federal government and the United States military. Now, 4 of those states, Colorado, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Washington, have gubernatorial moratoria. This means that the governors of these states have halted the death penalty by executive order, but the moratoria are not permanent law. As moral philosophers, we are called to look beyond the legal statutes and objectively and logically decide whether capital punishment is morally acceptable. So let's take a look at some arguments opposing the death penalty and some arguments in favor of the death penalty. Arguments opposing the death penalty, the first is the hypocrisy argument. And it proposes that the death penalty itself is circular logic. It goes like this. Killing is wrong, so somebody who kills deserves to be punished. That punishment is death. In order for that punishment to be carried out, they have to be killed. But killing is wrong, so the person that kills the killer must be punished. The punishment is death, and so on, and we end up going in a big circle, and at the end, I guess everybody dies. There is the pro-life argument. In an earlier lecture, I referred to the philosophical theological definition of pro-life, meaning respect for the dignity of all human life from its beginning to its natural end. So taking the life of a criminal would be terminating life prior to its natural end. Arguments in favor of the death penalty. The eye for an eye argument, which is actually a two-part argument. There are 2 eye for eye arguments. The first is essentially a revenge scenario. One who kills should be killed because taking a life forfeits a life. Human rights are not without limit. One person's rights end when they infringe upon another person's rights. For example, my right of free speech ends when it becomes hate speech, and it incites violence, and therefore infringes on someone else's right to security of person. The challenge with the eye for eye argument is it's not a right for right. It's not a quid pro quo necessarily. In the example I just gave, my right to free speech ends when I infringe on somebody's security of person. Does somebody's right to life end when they take away someone else's life? Or perhaps does someone's right to freedom end when they take away someone's life? There's more to be discussed there. There's more to be unpacked in that eye for an eye argument. Eye for an eye is also a religious argument because the phrase is actually taken from Scripture. It's taken from the book of Exodus, which is in the Torah and in the Old Testament of the Christian Bible. And the actual quote is, "You shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe." Exodus chapter 21, verses 23 through 25. That's the New American Translation. When a Christian looks at that, the Christian should also consider reading the rest of the book. Because in the New Testament, Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 and 39, the Christian will read the words of Jesus saying, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. When someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one to him as well." It may be an uninformed argument. The deterrent argument asserts that the prospect of the death penalty is daunting enough to dissuade people from not killing. So if I kill somebody, I'm going to get killed, so maybe I better not kill anybody. It's a deterrent. It's a good argument. Go to deathpenaltyinfo.org. There's historical data that proves that the argument isn't valid. It is not a deterrent. It is a good argument. It's been proven to be invalid. Then there's the Socratic or social contract argument. I'm going back to my old pal Socrates from ancient Greece. Socrates was found guilty in essentially a show trial of corrupting youth, really encouraging people to think openly and to think critically, but the government didn't like that. So he was found guilty and was sentenced to death. And one of his friends, Crito, came to him while he was in jail awaiting his death sentence, trying to talk him out of going through with the sentence, because Crito, among others, had arranged to get Socrates out of prison. If you've taken my Introduction to Philosophy class, you know this story well. And Socrates argued his reasoning for wanting to stay in prison and go through with his death sentence. And he had many, many reasons. One of those was adherence to a social contract. Socrates argued that he came into existence because of the government, because the government had licensed his parents' marriage, and he was born of that marriage. He went to government-funded schools. And because of that education, he was able to work. That essentially he owed everything he was to the government. If we take that argument and apply it today, marriage is hardly a prerequisite to the conception and birth of children today. But we can still look at what we get from the government, schooling, our education, opportunities to work, and say that we do owe a great deal to the society in which we live. So if that society decides that we should no longer live, then we owe it to that society to concede. That was the logic of Socrates. Perhaps sound logic.